All right, so very interesting news that was kind of just like slid into the middle of the week, and that is Minnesota defensive coordinator Joe Rossi. Joe Rossi's been a really good defensive coordinator for a long time up there at Minnesota, okay? And what ended up happening is that now Joe Rossi is headed now to Michigan State. He's headed now with Jonathan Smith. And this all does not look good for PJ Fleck. All right, because one, Kirk Soraka left him a couple of years ago, but this was a disappointing season for Minnesota football. Ethan Kaliakmanis was supposed to be the quarterback of the future there. You have Matt Simon and Jay Harbaugh as your offensive coordinators. You cannot get it done at Minnesota this year. And Kaliakmanis, that experiment failed. It wasn't like Tanner Morgan. I thought Kaliakmanis had really good NFL-style arm talent at times. It did not develop at all. And then losing Dalen Wright to TCU really hurt. Losing Bucky Irving, they lost another running back. So, PJ Fleck, the row the boat culture that is going on here in Minneapolis, it's not for everybody. And once it wears thin, it could be pretty tough because PJ Fleck kind of has one way of doing it, and it's kind of all about the culture and all about the row the boat mantra, all about row the boat. And I'm in on a lot of the stuff. I'm in on a lot of the mantras, like trying to be elite, hyper culture, your how, instead of the results, it's the how, instead of being process oriented or instead of being results oriented, it's about the response, that's what hyper is. It's how your, performance and then, then you do the performance, then you get the result. PJ Fleck has a lot of sayings, trying to be elite academically, socially, spiritually. It can wear thin on a lot of people. And apparently the Joe Rossi was with Fleck for a while, but now it goes to Michigan State. And you view East Lansing, Michigan as, all right, they're investing in Jonathan Smith a little bit. They had some success with Mark D'Antonio, but Minnesota's in the Twin Cities as well. And Minnesota is probably it's in better standing than Michigan State. What is Joe Rossi doing by bouncing to Jonathan Smith? What's he doing by going to Michigan State? I mean, this should set off alarm bells everywhere for Gopher fans, but really you could tell that Fleck's on the hot seat. I mean, Fleck barely beat Iowa this year. It was a down Big Ten conference, and it just wasn't. It was a terrible offensive season, and I think the offense is getting stale. I think that Fleck is has such control, a little bit of a control freak over the offense. He's not putting in any air raid principles. I think if you had a Rossi defense with an air raid principle, I think Fleck needs to know now that he needs to start playing the portal game. He needs to start focusing his efforts on fundraising, because that's the thing about Fleck and maybe Dave Aranda. And he's all about development, developing the 3 stars, developing the 4 stars. But you got to be patient in that way. And the problem is that Fleck is developing, and then some of these guys are bouncing after they're bouncing now in the transfer portal. And Minnesota is not a big player in the transfer portal. They're all about building. They're all about developing. And they don't have the funding of, Louisville or of Ole Miss. Their funding is going down, and Jonathan Joe Rossi sees the writing on the wall that this is not going to be a great start with Minnesota football, that players are leaving. And the upside of a Fleck-led offense, he might have reached the pinnacle. He might have reached the ceiling there. 2019, 2020, really 2019, the team with Tanner Morgan, Rashad Bateman as a sophomore, and Tyler Johnson, one of the best receivers. Tyler Johnson's probably the best receiver in Minnesota football history. Muhammad Ibrahim was on that team. Antoine Winfield, NFL player. NFL talent all over the field. Carter Coughlin's played in the NFL. The linebacker for the Houston Texans, Cashman, played in the NFL. 2019 was a magical season. A great group of guys. So they won 11-2 in 2019. They won the Outback Bowl over Auburn and Gus Malzahn. What a win. Then COVID happens, 3-4. 2022, they do beat Syracuse, go 9-4, but you remember them losing to Iowa and losing to these close teams, and now they go 5-7 again. So I guess it's 2 9-4s that do look decent for PJ Fleck, but still, the fact that this year was such a terrible year in such a soft Big Ten West, the fact that you lose games like Bowling Green and games you shouldn't lose, like being up at Northwestern, no quarterback play, the offense is really hurting you. Now they got this transfer Brosmer from like New Hampshire. Looks like an accurate quarterback, but again, I don't think they're making a lot of offensive coordinator structural changes at Minnesota. Where is the pivot going to be with Fleck? And I feel that right now, NIL's at a rough place. Joe Rossi's leaving, and I feel that the game is getting away from Fleck in terms of the transfer portal. I feel like it hurts guys like Dabo Swinney a little bit, but for the programs like Minnesota, you got to be a transfer portal destination. You look at Missouri, you look at Kentucky, South Carolina, the schools that are middling a little bit, because you aren't going to land 4- and 5-star talent. All right, and your recruiting is not going to be in the top 10. You have to become then a transfer portal destination. And PJ Fleck, I respect this about Fleck. He does a very thorough background check on each player. And coming out of high school, they need to be a fit in his unique environment, which is a lot maybe about slogans, a lot about being on time, a lot about 1-hour practices, everything very, very, very specific, all right, in terms of the team, you know, things that they do on a day-to-day basis. It's a great culture. It's you have to buy in, you have to be all into it, and it's not easy at all for a transfer to go into that culture. It's not, and the culture's not for everybody, meaning people will think it's hokey, some people, and that's what Fleck will admit. I'm not for everybody. But if you're willing to buy into everything about this culture, it'll make your life great. And I do believe that as well. Again, I do like PJ Fleck. I like the way he goes about it. It's just that Joe Rossi was just getting maybe tired of the antics. I don't know. I'm putting words in Rossi's mouth. I'm just trying to think about what Rossi was thinking about. Or most likely, hey, the funding is bad here. The offense is not where it needs to be. Jonathan Smith is already getting really good funding at Michigan State. I love the way he recruits. It's a solid, stable situation. And I could be, you know, a defensive coordinator and have more of a long leeway than PJ Fleck. Because PJ Fleck, after 5-7, you know, after a couple of 8-4s. I think they won the bowl game. So a couple of 8 wins, but now they're at 5. The portal, it's like you're going to get to 6 or 7 wins. And also the Big Ten's going to get tougher. PJ Fleck has been at Minnesota for 7 years. So that's actually quite a long time for PJ Fleck. So if it doesn't work out at Minnesota, I don't think Fleck's going to want to be a wide receiver or offensive coordinator, doesn't really call plays. So he's the type of guy that he needs to be a head coach, and the program needs to sustain. But PJ Fleck's going to probably have to really get uncomfortable if he wants results on the field. And Joe Rossi going to Michigan State is stunning because it's not like Shiraka going back home to Penn State. We can admit Penn State's a better program than Minnesota. Michigan State is your rival. You've beaten Michigan State pretty badly the last several times you've played them. They were stuck, you know, after Kenneth Walker. The last couple, they had that one good year with Mel Tucker, but the D'Antonio years late were ugly, okay? The offense was pitiful, and then even with Mel Tucker, they had one good year, and then Mel Tucker scandal happens, disastrous season this year. Now Joe Rossi's like, I want to leave the Twin Cities and go to Michigan State. So guys, answer me that question. I really think that there's trouble at Minnesota. I think that's what you have to look at. And there's something really positive with NIL going on at Michigan State.